So I remember when I first started doing HackerRank or just practicing, I
Mm-hmm.
would write out everything and I
Mm-hmm.
would explicitly check all my assumptions. It took like for freaking ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like it helped me build that skill. And then when I was good enough at that, then I could kind of fall back on that,
Mm-hmm.
where it was something that was there even if I was in a code editor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so just that and consistent practice is how I would say I developed the skill.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. It's 10 a.m. A
Yeah,
little early, but it's all good.
yeah. Y- you seem to you have quite the calendar going. How many of these do you do like a week?
Like two or three. I just build a backlog
Two
and
or three?
then
Okay,
yeah, it's not that bad, but it's like doing it just adds up. That's it.
gotcha.
Yeah. Anyway, so tell me about yourself. Tell me like where you are in the interview process. Tell me like where you make the most mistakes and what you're hoping to get out of today.
All right, sounds good. So my name is where okay, tell me about yourself. Yeah. So I recently graduated with a. I have been interning at Cisco for the past 3 summers, and I was lucky enough to get um, what converted to full time from internship.
Oh,
And I
nice!
started my job
Congrats.
on Monday. Thank you. That was fun. My sticking point in doing interview prep. Ever since you said have you tried solving the problem first? I've been
Mm-hmm.
pretty good about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I would still say that's my most consistent sticking point because it it's still very tempting just to start writing things and
Mm-hmm.
hope that you figure it out. I mean, especially when you've done because what I've been doing is I've been doing targeted practice where I go in a single section and I do a
Mm-hmm.
lot of drilling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so like when you do trees, for example, and you don't know breadth first search or depth first search, you're gonna have a bad time. But as
Mm-hmm.
soon as you learn that, then you can do like a quarter of the problems. And so
Yeah.
then you might not actually have to do the planning because you have
Mm-hmm.
so many problems that you can just get it right. And then when you
Mm-hmm.
go to strings or something else, you're still back at square one, or you have to plan again. And so
Right.
then when you're too comfortable, you kind of get out of the good habit, and so just getting back to it. So that's like
Mm-hmm.
that I would say the biggest sticking point. Like I helped you get out today. So I hope to get out of kind of an evaluation, kind of that checkpoint of where I am. I'm doing some practice made code, doing some Pramp interviews. What I'm just hoping to get is just I don't know, I'd say kind of evaluation or just get some practice from someone that can probably do or has a lot of experience evaluating candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then just, the ideal for me would be to every few months to have like a check-in. I mean, we'll see. Maybe I'm just starting, so maybe every 6 months or whatever. But like to see how things progress. To me, that'd be cool because of what I find most motivational is getting my butt kicked or getting something or getting graded.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just doing problems, then it's like okay, you're just doing problems. But in my Pramp interviews, the amount of confidence and fluidity of thought as I've done more of them has been very encouraging for me. And so I would definitely have to do this stuff just Pramp interviews, but that's kind of how I hope to get out of it.
Okay, that makes sense. Because when you said that you were well, you had a full-time position, most people usually just stop doing interview prep or something like that, like after they get the job offer. So I thought it was a little weird that you mentioned that you have a job, and you're still doing interview prep.
Yeah. Also about the job. So I've never actually passed a technical interview.
Okay.
Um, so I got the internship. Actually, I interviewed for it before I learned how to code.
Mm,
I got it before I learned how to code.
mm,
And so just by doing well at internship, I've managed to, I think, do pretty well, considering that I'd never have done technical interviews or passed them. And so, I guess for me, I mean, you always kind of have that base level line of imposter syndrome when you first start. But
mm,
given that passing a tech is kind of it's kind of like the initiation, so to speak, that we all kind of go through, given how
mm,
people interview, and the fact that
mm,
for me, I hadn't really done that. Um, it's an extra level layer of kind of, I wouldn't say insecurity, but it's a box I know I haven't checked.
I
And
see.
so until I check that box, I'm just gonna keep going until I, feel like, okay, if COVID causes me to lose my job, or just I just lose my job, I can just, I can fall back on that. And it's not this thing that I've been ignoring for like 3 years. So
Got it. So it's more like just a personal goal and just to be prepared for anything.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay. So basically, based on what you've told me, you're just way too used to throwing out patterns, and then because you've done so many problems, you pretty much can skip the design phase. So what I'm hearing is that you want something that doesn't really follow a pattern.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Cool. With that, I guess we can get started. Okay. So I'm going to start the timer. All right. Ready?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Cool. So pretty simple problem. Find the maximum in a stack.
Find the maximum in a stack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, cool. Okay. Great. So maximum in a stack. So we're given, okay, a stack, and all we can do is, okay, given a stack of integers, return the maximum number.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we have a stack. Um, I'm going to represent it as a list just for now.
Mm-hmm.
And so the numbers are like A, B, C, and then
Mm-hmm.
maybe D. And so stacks don't support indexing. So let's say that B is the highest number,
Mm-hmm.
for example. Um, so in order to see B, we'll actually have to pop D, and then we'll have to pop C.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have to pop, then we'll get to B. And even if B is the max, we'll still have to go to A in order to know about whether or not A is the max.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to go through every single element and pop it. And what we're also have to do, I think, is keep not necessarily a counter, but like a local variable or temporary variable to see what the current maximum is.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you might do in this example, if we're going to go all the way through it, is you have this stack. Let's say the max right now is none.
Mm-hmm.
So we pop D,
Mm-hmm.
and we can check if none, max equals elements. Um, so then we pop D, so then the max is going to be D. And then we're going to pop C, and the max is going to be max is C, D.
Okay.
And then we pop B, and then we just keep going until we eventually run out of elements.
Okay. So what you're
And
planning?
then
So you're planning
mhm,
on popping the entire stack to find the maximum. Is that right?
that is correct.
Okay.
Okay. Um, and then I'm using Python, so I was going to use the max, um, the built-in max function, although I could write my own if that's preferred.
It's nah. It's a simple max
Okay.
function. You can use the library.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So then the runtime was going to be linear because you're going through all the elements.
Mm-hmm.
And then the space complexity would be, I think, constant because you're just having a single variable that you're holding, and you're
Cool.
also going to be just doing this function, which is not going to take up too much
Well,
space.
okay. Once you found a stack, all right. Yep. Actually, yeah. Go ahead, code it up. See what happens.
Okay.
It's pretty simple. Don't worry. Don't worry. It's the easy one.
Is a stack a list, or is it? Can I assume that or no?
It's a list. Not a list, but it's like just assume that it's a stack.
Okay. So does it have a length? Can I?
Whatever the stack
Um,
API is for Python. I'm a Java
okay.
programmer, so
Gotcha. Okay. initially it's none. While stack is empty is false.
Mm-hmm.
I don't usually all the stacks I've seen have been lists or they've been something called an NQ, but I'm just gonna. I don't know if this is actually the right syntax for Python. However, I know that they usually have an is empty method.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways,
Yeah, it's like
okay.
size zero. It's whatever.
Yeah, right. Okay, equals false. Stack you pop the element on the right hand side. If m equals none, then we just say m is temp. Else, if it's not none, then the new value is the max between m and temp. Do you want me to change or fix the capitalization errors, or do you?
It's fine. I get the
Okay.
idea. Okay.
Okay.
Now you did find the maximum for sure. Now, what if I changed the scenario a bit? What if I asked
Mm-hmm.
you to design the stack such that every single time I would be able to perform normal stack operations and support these, so I could support a pop, support push, and support max. That means that
Sure.
if I were to, yeah, so I need to be able to support these three APIs.
Great. All right, so this is a variant of the min stack problem, only it's max stack, I believe. So what I'm thinking is, let's say we have, let's do some real numbers this time, because that should be a better example.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we have, let's say what you want, 4, 3, 2, and 5, to, let's say 7, right? So what you want, so this is a normal stack, so this is the stack I'd return. And then we're going to have something else called a max stack. And so the max stack is it's going to be the current max element at that time. So what I mean by that is, so we're just start at the right hand side first, because that would make the most sense when describing it. So when we pop 7, what we want to do is we want the top of the max stack to also be the max element currently. So when we pop 7, the max element at the time is 7, and then after 7, the next largest element is 5. So then if we pop 2, the max element would also be 5. And then if we pop 5 at the time of popping, so I guess my question is, so max, when you call max, you want the greatest element at that time. Is that the greatest
Yes.
element in the stack? Okay.
Yeah. So like the greatest element in the stack at the current moment.
Okay. Cool. So then once you pop 7, then 5 would be the max in my example. Okay, cool. So then we want to create something like this, I think. 4 and then 4 and then 4. And so what we're going to be doing is I think it's pretty, how you create this stack is pretty straightforward. You're just going to be appending to the right. However, how you create the stack might be a bit less obvious. So there's two kind of scenarios we have. Either stack is empty, I'm going to say is none, or stack does not equal none. So if stack is none, then of course the max stack is going to be whatever element we're pushing. However, if stack is not none, what we should do is what I think we should say is we say max stack dot push is going to be the max between stack dot peak and then the current element that we have.
Wait, what is this?
So, what's what?
Your max stack is pushed at the top element. Oh. And
excuse me.
what's element? Yeah.
Do you want me to quickly go over?
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know what element stands for.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I haven't really defined that. Okay. So, thank you. So let's say that for our push, we're given element, and so let's say you want to push 5. So 5 is the element in this case. Okay. Yeah. So okay. I feel good that if I start writing code, I'll find an answer. But if I haven't laid out my logic clearly enough, I can do a more concrete example to describe my thought. Which of the two would you rather have?
Are you asking me as the interviewer or as if I was doing the interview?
I was asking you as the interviewer. Is that not a question I should ask you if you're interviewing me?
I'm gonna just say do whatever you think is gonna get you to the best answer.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. All right. In that case, I'm going to create my class, and so class max stack. Okay, so we have the class. We'll call it max stack. We're gonna have three things. We're gonna have the init, so def init.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so self self dot stack equals that, and then dot max stack equals this. Then we're gonna have three these functions. So def pop self, and then def push. Okay. So we initialize both stacks. Initially it'd be empty, and so def pop. Um, so when I call pop, what if the stack is empty? What do you want me to return?
If the stack is empty, well, whatever a normal stack would return empties, which would be null, right?
Yeah, none. Okay, cool. So this is supposed to be
I
code.
mean, you can also throw an exception as stack empty exception as well.
Okay. Um, so if not, or yeah, no, that'll work. Okay. If self dot if not self dot stack, um, if so we have initially we've empty stack and max stack. So we have a max element, and so that's what's coming from max stack. And then we also just want to get rid of the current element stack. Okay. And we also have max. Gotcha. Okay. So what I was doing is this is not actually what pop would do. From pop, you'd actually just want to return self dot pop. Yeah. But we would still want to pop from both stacks.
Okay.
Okay. So when we pop, we want to pop from both stacks. We want to pop from max stack. What we care about is actually the element on the top element of the stack. Okay. And then max would be where we would. So max exception if empty, else peak max stack.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's do push. Okay. So we have these two stacks. Right. So let's add the element to max stack.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we add to stack first, we won't be able to check. We won't be able to peek. So I guess we should also okay. So if we do a peek on an empty, should I assume that if I do a peek on an empty stack, yeah, that's going to be the inflation will be a list, so we should get that would be an error. So if I do that, then it'll break. Okay. So if let that push. Yeah. Okay. So if self dot stack equals empty list, um, then self dot stack dot append element, and then self dot max stack dot append element. Do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
If self dot stack is not equal like that. Okay. Then we're going to do is want to get the element from just normal stack. Then we want to compare that to the element we have. Okay. Self dot max stack dot append. So we have the max between self dot stack dot peak. And then we have the element. And then once we append the max element to max stack, then we want to append the element to our stack. And stack dot append elements. Okay, so then push for two options, either it's empty or it's not empty. If it's empty, then we have to add the elements to both stacks because it's the max because there's nothing else to compare it to. If there is something else to compare it to, which is this case, we want to append the max between the top element. Okay, so we want to append the max element. So the max element will actually be in the max stack. Okay, so we want the max between element of the max stack, top element of the max stack, and the element that we currently have. And then we can append an element to our stack itself. Okay. And then max stack. So if there's going to be exception if our stack is empty.
Mm-hmm.
And since the size of our stack is going to be the size of our max stack is going to be the same size as our stack, we can just raise the exception based upon the stack.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we're still here, then we can return, actually, let's do elif self dot stack, return self dot max stack dot seek.
Mm-hmm.
So it's empty. For popping, check if it's empty, raise exception if empty, else pop for max stack, and then we want to return the value on the actual stack.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say pop, you just want the top element from the stack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when you say max, it's kind of like a peak, but you're peaking for the max element. This is not a pop.
Yeah, I just want the maximum element at the current time in the stack.
Wonderful. Okay. And then push, we're adding elements. So then if the stack is empty, appending the right hand side, and the right hand side, stack is not empty, we want to append the max between the current max and the element that we're given. And then we're just appending the element, regardless if it's the max or not. And then for max, if max is empty, the stack is empty, raising an exception, else we're turning the top of the stack. Okay. I feel good. What uses the three things you wanted? Okay. I mean the constructors, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's my solution.
Okay. That's good. All right, what's your runtime for these?
Okay, so the init's going to be constant time. The pop is going to be, if using collections, it'll be O of C.
Of what?
O of 1.
Mm-hmm.
If we do push, it's going to be O of 1. I'm assuming that the max is O of 1 as well. This is the sign statement. And then these would also be O of 1 because, we're using collections. That's how it would work.
Okay, sure. Now, how would you go about testing? How would you go about writing a test suite for this class?
If I was to test to make sure that all the functionality worked.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I would do is I would test. Okay. Test. So test the edge cases first. So I would test to see if the stack is empty. I would check to make sure. Let's do what? So we have the functions individually, and then I want to make sure that the functions don't break the other functions. So what I mean by that is I want to make sure that when pop pops, I'll just write this down. Just a easy.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if we're testing the init, so we should have two stacks.
Mm-hmm.
Both should be size equal to 0.
Okay.
If we're going to pop, what I would expect is error if empty. So then else pop top element.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have I'd probably cycle through a bunch of elements. So I'd probably have I would have an idea. In my test case, I would know that the stack should represent something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when I was popping, I'd be looping through to make sure that it's popping the correct element out. So I say top element. That's kind of what I'm referring to. And also, I would probably check the size, both our stack and our max stack. And so when we pop, both stack and max stack should decrease in size.
Well,
So
I didn't expose the size API for you, so.
okay, I was thinking that since they're lists, you can call the length of a list. However, if that's not, if I'm okay working with an implementation.
Okay.
That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if they would decrease in size, we're assuming they're not empty to begin with. So okay,
Mm-hmm.
so we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Okay, pop the top element. Okay, cool. So let's pop. What do we do for push? So okay, we can't do size for push. So that's okay. Push. Let's see here. So we're doing max. Okay, so I could check to make sure that. So after we push, so we can use max though. Although we should probably test max before we start using it.
Okay.
So let's do that first. So then for max, what I would do is we would have a different stacks you're creating. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe we'd have 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then maybe we have some variants of 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so what we'd be doing is we'd be putting the max element in different parts of the list to get some variance going to see if so maybe we'd have like 6 and then 2, 3 and then 7 or 8, and then we're gonna have these individual max elements that should be updating as we go. So so look through different lists, assert that max equals I, and where I is just some index that, I mean, I guess we're gonna have 2 different lists. We're gonna have a list that we're gonna use to pop, or excuse me, not to pop, to push, and then we have a list that's gonna represent the max. And so we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would be like this would be our stack that would be calling for push. I guess they are both kind of equally dependent on each other. Okay. And this would be the stack that'd be to say M. And so 2 for 5, this would be 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. And then to save time, I'm not gonna go through what the next one would be, but that's my idea.
Okay.
Between how I do max. Is there anything else I do for max? Yeah. So if empty, raise exception. Exception. Yeah. And anything else? I think no. I think that's all I do for max. The next bullet we have push left. So if we push, so size isn't something we can do. Okay. And since we're pushing, there's no conducting errors, assuming that since it's Python, we can dynamically allocate more space for our list. So we can't do size. What we can do, what we'll be changing potentially is what the max element is. So when I would be testing this, I'd be very aware of the fact that both push and max are kind of equally dependent on each other, given like what we can use to see what is true and what is false. If max isn't working, then push is not going to work. And if push isn't working, then max isn't going to work. So if either of these two don't work, it's not clear which, like one of them might be breaking the other one. Okay. So if we're doing push, we can't touch. Okay, what we can do is it would be kind of the similar case for this. So I guess what for max. So when I talk about max, what is you so loop through yep, loop through list. That's thorough, that's through list, append, assert. And then I guess we should say this is push instead of append. And then list assert. So actually, I want to add something to my test for max. So we're going to be testing what the max element is when we're pushing to the stack. And I also want to test what the max element is when we pop to the stack. Okay. And I could write out some examples of what I would expect to be happening. However, I think that for now, I'm just going to leave it how it is. Okay. The back to push, we're only going to be doing this kind of just part of the test.
Okay.
So it's going to be the same thing as a max, only we only care about what happens when we push. So that's how I test them individually. What I would also do, so that'd be kind of, I guess, unit testing. But I would do some integration tests where, okay, so, which is also kind of what Max is to some degree, because first we push everything and then we pop
Mm-hmm.
everything. And so maybe we have, because what I'm doing with my integrate, it's not really, I guess, technically not an integration test. But I want to test to say, okay, if Max works and push works
Mm-hmm.
and pop works, what happens if I push max, pop max, push max, pop,
I
what
see what you
happens
mean.
when I combine them together? Do they break? Um, and so what I usually would call this, I mean, and I'm not sure what the right verbiage would be, but I just kind of call it general testing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have a bunch of different stacks that I would use, and I would just cycle through using all of them. And so there wouldn't really be any edge cases here for trying to push from empty things.
Mm-hmm.
What there would be axes that would vary. Okay. I can write out some examples of what that would be. It depends what level of detail you want me to go into.
I think it's good for now. I think I have a pretty good sense of where you're aiming for this. Okay, let's expand the question
Sure.
then. Suppose I had to integrate this into a system where I have, 100,000 potential clients accessing this data structure. How would you go about allowing for this?
Okay. Sorry, you kind of broke up for a second. So we have
Yeah,
100
it's
clients,
100 to 100,000. Anywhere in that
100 to
ballpark.
100,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Who want to use this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, so when they're using this, what's I guess the UI? What's the UI? Jeez, hit the stack. What are they using? They're importing it from like a library?
No, they're all using it all at the same time. Like suppose I put this on a server and then I have 100,000 people making connections and they're all wanting to access the app from accessing the data structure from different threads.
Okay. So they'd be interfacing with it. Okay, so they'd be calling. Oh, okay, I see. So they'd be saying, okay, Eli, create my stack. Okay, then pop. Okay, so okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
What does it matter what platform they're on at all, or is they're just
No,
using it?
in an independent platform. I don't. It doesn't matter if it's Django or whatever. I'm just asking how would you make this ability to handle from multiple threads?
Okay, so I should so more like a backend scenario of how I would represent this internally. Um, okay, cool. So what I would do is 100 to 100,000 clients. I don't have too much personal experience on how much load that would be. So, I mean, okay, let's talk about quickly talk about the API.
Not necessarily asking about web app. I'm just asking for on a very simple case like multi-threading.
Okay, multi-threading.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sure. How would I handle this? Okay, so in that case, you would not want me to. I would not going into API would not really
No,
make sense at all.
no.
No. Okay, cool. 120,000. So what I'm thinking right now is thinking, well, would we have one machine to handle this, or would we have multiple machines to handle this? Because that's going to change how things would work.
Okay.
Um,
What if okay? So what would each scenario present?
okay, sure. So if we have so if we have one machine versus new machines. Okay. So if we had one machine, um, hmm, I don't know a bunch about multi-threading, and so what I would be very tempted to do is I would be tempted to use a bunch of virtual machines. I would try
Oh,
to split this up to kind of handle that internally. So
okay.
we'll keep you
Again,
for
I'm
that.
not talking about like
No.
the architecture. I'm talking about like how would you set up just this one class? Like okay, let's suppose I independent of any system. Suppose I have one program, one user, but that data structure is being accessed from multiple threads and at multiple points in that program.
Okay. And how would I implement it, or how would I use threading to solve that problem?
Yeah, how would you?
Okay. Um, so I'm talking about threading again. Unfortunately, I don't know a ton about threading.
Okay.
Would I be talking about CPU cycles at all? Would I be
No,
talking about?
no, yeah, you're
Nope.
just be
Okay, cool.
implementing. Okay, so we would step back as the interviewer and just talk as a person. Reviewing this, I would say, do you know anything about locks in Python?
About locks,
Mm-hmm.
I know what a lock is, but I've not implemented a lock in Python.
Okay. Okay, no locks semaphore. All right, that's fine. What about observable pattern?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's see. Where can
Cool.
I go? Yeah, and that's just about it, actually.
Interesting.
Mm.
So if we're kind of we're changing the frame. What kind of answer would you be expecting in that case? Because I was kind of, and I think it's clear I don't know. Yeah, I don't have the information that would help me solve that problem. So either I would love to know what you said locked and you said observable patterns. So I would love to, are those, if I would go Google and so I could get the information that would help me solve that problem, would these be the two
Yeah.
things I should learn?
I would say this is very niche, but it should still also you should also show at least you have some knowledge of it. So multi-threading locks, is just to protect read and write access. And the way, and I would go through your the way you described your functions, excuse me, and then just make sure that I can enforce locks on each one of my structures because your
Hmm.
stack and max stack kind of operate in lockstep. Like every single time you write to stack, you're writing to max stack, and vice versa. So ultimately, these functions
Oh,
themselves would have to be like surrounded by a lock. In Java, if you
I
can,
see.
yeah, if you can see my cursor, it would just be lock and then lock with this or
Gotcha.
synchronize, something like this. But then
Okay.
I would need to provide the proper reasoning for it as well.
Gotcha. So if I can understand this correctly, since it's all these people are using the same max stack, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Eli, like, if you're talking to me, okay, Eli, so, right, we want to push, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have 20 people trying to push at the same time, and you have 20 people, and you have 5 people doing max stack at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
If you just do it, I mean, given that, I mean, I guess we're on the same computer, so I guess we can create a queue, get the organization going. But hey, how do we make sure that when we pop, that we don't break max, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
that, and you do that by locking, so you would make sure that the value of the memory cannot be changed
Yeah, you're basically
until the
overcomplicating
things, yeah.
it. You're kind of
Okay.
overcomplicating it. It's really just trying to make sure the access doesn't break. So like for instance, if I do push, if I have like four threads, like I push and then pop, right?
Mm-hmm.
What can potentially happen is that these pop order gets executed before the pushes if these are four different thread IDs, and so this
Yeah.
would cause like exception, and then push.
Mm.
So you want to be able to make sure that these orders that this is not going to break your program. So that's really what I'm trying to get at.
Cool.
Okay, but otherwise, I think you did pretty well. Actually, I don't really have too many complaints. Mostly just efficiency.
Okay.
And it's just really small nitpicky things. I
No, please
assume.
go for it.
I mean, definitely you've seen a problem like this before, so that really helped you.
Yeah.
So, although I know you said you wanted one that didn't follow a pattern, but once a candidate has seen a lot of questions, it's kind of hard to really break away from that.
No, that's
But
fair.
all right, so just I don't think I need to really go over the replay. I think you were actually pretty efficient with your time. It's just really your code. So first things first, not necessary to do an ELIF doesn't equal none because it's either none or it's not. You can just replace this with an else.
Yep.
Just a small thing.
I
Let's see.
see.
Yeah. Not necessarily write this code. Um, and then next is really this one kind of got you into a little bit of trouble, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible because it's like, yeah, you're still fleshing out the thoughts, and I just thought I'd slow you down because I don't know what this is, and you said, oh, I don't know either. But then, getting into your code here before you have that solid idea is a little risky, but I think
Mm.
at this point you kind of had an idea, so I let it go. But just it's definitely this could potentially be a point of failure for you too.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
just be aware of that, and Yeah, I think you're able to figure it out. You asked the right question. What should happen? Do you want this to be an exception or not? Fair. Those are good questions to ask. You did get caught up a little bit here,
Yeah.
where you had this going
Yep.
on. Instead of saying max stack, you had stack earlier. Yeah.
hmm
That what was your thinking behind putting stack first before instead of max stack?
So so as you're kind of talking about, I didn't flesh the idea out entirely before I started writing it, and
Mm-hmm.
so since I hadn't fleshed it out formally, whatever thought I kind of had, it did not necessarily match. There's no plan, right? And so it didn't really match any plan. Um, so the answer was I was not thinking at all. I was just thinking, oh, it was like whatever my brain thought would be a good idea, which is
Mm-hmm.
why I love to habitually, because in which the code is written, I guess I kind of feel like there's an implied pattern or implied idea. And I guess it's also kind of risky because usually it's nicer to have a separate formalization and then see if that formalization or abstraction matches what the code says.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, kind of backing up what you were saying, because even though I've literally not max stack, but I've seen min stack, and this is a very similar problem, except min, except I think this pops. So given that for a problem that I've seen and done, I think twice, I still made this, I think is would heavily imply for a problem that I haven't seen before that this would be something that would kill me, considering that I kind of already like I kind of knew what I was supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
and if for what I didn't know what I was supposed to do, I would probably read this code and be like, oh yeah, that seems right, even though it wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Again, sorry I couldn't give you like a problem that you hadn't seen before, but again, it's hard for me to know. But at least we got I still identified. Yeah, this is kind of a mistake that you can run into, but everyone makes these mistakes. It's just to watch out for them.
No, that's fair. Because I think for me, my ideal performance would be you just walk through it and there's no backtracking. Like
Yeah.
so yeah, I completely agree with you.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a really good standard to have, and I think everybody has that. But at the same time, it's almost impossible to do just because we're human. We're gonna make these mistakes anyway. So.
Absolutely.
All right, so in it we have two stacks, both should be size 0. Fair. All right. I think the one issue I have is really just this,
Mm.
where you have max and push. You have pop, max, push, and it's as you mentioned, you are also implicitly testing max. You're implicitly testing push with max. And
Mm.
in a real world, I think once I saw this, I would have just immediately backtracked to push, and say, oh well, because I would have immediately just done push. Especially this would become a lot more clear if you had thought of how to test it in the very beginning. You wouldn't necessarily make this mistake. Does that make
So are
sense?
you saying that if I ran the push test case, then I wouldn't have, then this code is basically, so you're saying it's an inefficiency, we're making the same test twice. Is that right?
No, it's just it's a little bit of a flag. Let me see if I can make myself clearer. So, if you when you write this code, you're going to want to test
hmm
it, right?
hmm
And the order in which you test it, if you were to test max, you would see that you have to get push and pop built out
Mm.
first, right?
Mm.
So, would it make sense to write the test for push and pop first?
So okay, I guess I was confused when you said write versus run. So yeah, no. But yeah, I would and writing, okay, I see. Yes, yes. Yeah, I would given okay, cool. So what you're saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that okay, Eli, when you wrote Max, you're using push and pop. And so
Mhm.
you should probably get push and pop squared away before you touch Max,
Correct.
before you run Max.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty much like hey, does this guy really test this code? That's really what I'm thinking when I look at something like
hmm
this. Um, and so after that, definitely get used to some kind of locks or observable pattern. I don't know if Rx Python is a thing. I know we have something called Rx Java, and and, and reactive programming when it comes to being able to handle multi-threading. So
Mm.
I would have accepted either doing observables or doing locks because something like Rx Java is already handling a lot of the multi-threading underneath for us and a lot of thread switching. And so that's why I asked if you had any experience with it. Otherwise, I would have accepted locks as as an answer, but you would have had to justify your reasoning.
Okay. And what was the when you're saying Java? What was that word you're saying? It's playing with R. I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you
R
quite correctly.
RX RX
RS.
Java. I don't know if
Cool.
RX Python exists, but yeah, I would look into that, especially that you might be using it. I'm not 100% sure, but it is
Mm-hmm.
something that is pretty widespread and pretty well used, at least in the Android community and in Java in general. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a way for us to do like reactive programming with objects. And I don't know if Python has a something similar.
Okay.
Yeah. But overall, I would rate your performance about an 8 out of 10. I think it's actually very good. Your approach is very clean. Regardless of the answer you got, I think just cleaning up those little small things would get you in a pretty good spot actually. How do you think you did?
I think I did well. I mean, I always like to set a bar higher than what is, I guess, like I always like to have something to work on. I
Mm-hmm.
think all in all, I did pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the code I do, it's just writing, it's just solving the problem and then running it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do testing when I do leak code just to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that I guess I try and keep the ratio up, even though it doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually had implemented a stack before,
Mm-hmm.
and so it was helpful for me that I could kind of remember what I was trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
even though the ordering itself that was a really good point. Um, what I'm kind of happy I did, even though this sounds kind of odd, I'm really happy that I immediately became clear that I did not know what I was doing here
Mm-hmm.
because else I would just be sitting on wheels, and then the interviewer would be kind of like, okay, this guy is just either bullshitting or he doesn't really know anything. And
Yeah.
so I'm happy that I kind of immediately wired down and said, okay, I don't really get what's going on.
Yep.
Um, no, overall, I'm also happy how at the start I start out with an example and seeing what the max would be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess what I working on, I would like to get a better. I would like to create a standard of how verbose I get when talking about my initial design.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to not rely upon the interviewer to tell me of like what level of detail I should get. Just have that opinion for myself and have that opinion be calibrated correctly. So most interviewers should be pleased with that.
I would say
But
when
go
you
ahead.
understand it, you have a full idea, and then you have to then the next step is communicating it to the interviewer and making sure that they understand it on the same level that you do.
Mm, that's a good point. Um, so yeah, I think overall I'm pretty happy with what. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd say exceptional. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, your approach is very clean. Question for you though. How useful was the guide in getting you to this point?
How useful were you guiding me to get to this point? Wait,
Yeah,
say it
like
again.
the guide I wrote. You said you read it, so I was wondering how
Mm,
much of an impact did that have in formulating your this approach for you?
gotcha. Your guide. What would I say? I think for me, I really resonated with the kind of tone, I guess I'd say, of
Mm-hmm.
your of the guy that you wrote.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I really liked the have you tried solving the problem yet?
Mm-hmm.
For me, because for me that helped identify a pattern that I was doing consistently. Because what I've been doing leak code probably for about a year,
Oh.
on and off. And
Mm-hmm.
recently I got really like I say like a year, but like really it was like one problem a day. And then recently I started doing a lot more problems a day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so for like 6 months, I was just kind of looking at a problem and like taking like an hour. Like my first, okay, it was just really bad. And then like once I realized that I should design everything, then as you kind of when you shared it with this person wrote you an email saying that now they can solve the mediums in like 20 minutes. I had a very similar thing happen to me where I was immediately able to create the abstraction and then execute. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was extremely helpful for me. Most of your guide was kind of based around, okay, here's how you should kind of on ramp, and here's because like, okay, you have a 6 month time window or 6 week time window, get as good as quickly as possible. I mean, given for my situation, I'm not really in that. And so really, I just checking off your resources and then, storing those so I can, I kind of have a longer timeline, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So working through those is very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really like. the part that stuck out to me was, okay, you got the problems. When you just like can't keep going, okay, you get the problem and you can't solve it. Okay, now you can solve it. Okay, now you can solve it in 15 minutes. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and so kind of having this relentless attitude of going until you're just. I mean, the answer is not to complain. The answer is just to have action and do it consistently.
Pretty much.
So that was great. Yeah, it was just I liked the tone the most.
You like
Honestly,
the
that it
tone.
was the I yeah. Do you say how do you like the tone or you why?
I don't know. I think it's mostly like I'm not gonna lie. Like I was pretty worried whether or not to put it out because I thought a hell of a lot of people would be hella offended.
No, yeah, like yeah, I think that in some cases might be the case. For me, there's a book called Relentless by Tim S. Grover. He's the dude that trained Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read that book, and then if you read your intro, it's the same. It's a similar level of intensity, I would say, in some ways.
I
And
see.
so for me, I'm someone that I don't necessarily operate in like a "fuck you, pay me" attitude, but like deep down, like I am very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a phrase that they ask you in MLB where if when you're like being signed, they say, okay, do you love to win or hate to lose? And there's actually a correct answer. And the correct answer is you hate to lose because if you love to win, winning is nice, but it's not going to drive you. If you hate to lose, it's something that stares you in the face every day that you absolutely detest and that will cause action.
Right.
And so I think the way you layered the problem. We're like, okay, instead of having, interview prep be this thing that sucks, that's unfair, it's this challenge that you can apply your attitude towards,
Okay.
your pressure towards, and then it allows you to gamify it and also it gives you a mental framework to how to respond to setbacks in a way that is most efficient and effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what I was really trying to ask is like your approach to the problem. How much impact did the guide have in formulating this, or was this something that you already had and you just needed, just need to codify it?
Yeah, sorry, I should probably answer your question.
No, it's okay. I mean, it seems like you really liked it, so I don't worry. I'm like bathing in your praise right now. So,
Okay, good. um, I would say that how I approach the problem, I would say your guide um, gave me a reason to change my approach.
okay.
Your guide did not help me come up with my specific approach, but your
Mm-hmm.
guide gave me a litmus test to say, okay, does your approach sound like the approach that is usually successful? And you're talking about how I solve this specific problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, like you seem to have a pretty good approach of how to do it, and I'm wondering if this is consistent across the board for you, if you do it
Mm.
systematically, and how you actually developed it.
Yeah. This is usually that is the consistent approach I try to use. Um, how I developed it, when I first started doing when I first started coding, I think kind of a psychological experience most people who start coding feel is you just want to start typing things. You want
Mm-hmm.
the syntax to change color. It's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly realized that part of my mind kind of shut off when I was doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, if my mind shuts off, what's the best way to do it? Well, okay, if I write everything out, then maybe that'll work. And so I remember when I first started doing HackerRank or just practicing, I
Mm-hmm.
would write out everything and I
Mm-hmm.
would explicitly check all my assumptions. It took like for freaking ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like it helped me build that skill. And then when I was good enough at that, then I could kind of fall back on that, where it was something that was there, even if I was in a code editor.
Mm-hmm.
And so just that and consistent practice is how I would say I developed the skill.
Okay, so it's like you built it from the ground up, essentially.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, but that's everything from my side. Um, I mean, I
Cool.
could give you another question, but I think at this point you kind of already know what your issue is. And since you've already done like a year of leak code, which is like that's like over 300 questions, then it's like there's nothing I can really ask except for something a
Mm,
lot more wild and complicated that would and almost non-standard that would challenge you.
mm. Yeah. I think that there are things that are not as wildly complicated that probably challenge me. But no, yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, so cool. I'm happy that I seem to be on par
Yeah,
with what is decent.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't have much on my side either, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What I would be interested is, I guess, given that I did set this up with you when I was still before I had started my job,
Mm-hmm.
and so given how you're changing, I think I'd be changing classification under your model. So I guess I would be interested in knowing what a session rate would be. If I wanted, if I would ask you to come up with some stupidly intense problem, and or just the same thing. Like I don't know, I've done stacks. Maybe I just got lucky here. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I am still interested in that because just to be redundant for me or whatever.
Let's see. I since you made it clear at the end that you didn't really have what's it called experience with multi-threading, so I wouldn't have given you like a system design. This is kind of exercise in object-oriented programming as well. So the only other option for me to do is to give you a dynamic programming one.
So what programming one? Dynamic.
Dynamic programming.
Cool.
That would have been that would have
Gotcha.
been the other option. But again, I don't think you would have gotten too much value out of that.
Okay. So what you're saying is you don't see a lot of room for improvement with respect to you interviewing me. Like what you're saying is kind of a tight ship. Not a lot of room.
It's like because I gave you a problem that you were very familiar with, it was a little bit harder for me to gauge your skill, but I think based on the based on the approach that you took and how you thought and communicated, I would have definitely passed you.
Awesome. Great.
Hmm.
Um, okay. So, um, I mean, I'm still going to personally, I'm still going to keep practicing and such.
Hmm.
But so what usually happens? I just asked you for sorry.
Hmm.
Um, one thing from you is it sounds like y y I don't know if I'm misinterpreting this, but there's not. I mean, yes, yeah, there's a couple. There's the sys design, which I don't have experience for, and there's dynamic programming, which I haven't done any work on. So I
Hmm.
would fail that 100%. Actually, I do
Yeah.
a little bit, but not a lot. Do you think it would make sense for me to get an evaluation with you again, or do you think that I'm pretty close to what I can? I'm pretty close. I'm kind of close, and it's just me filling out the edges. Which of those
I
two?
think it's just you
Yeah.
filling out the edges actually, because again, you're
Okay.
practicing this on a regular basis. Most people who ask me for help are usually have like a interview in like in like 2 months or something, and they
Gotcha.
haven't been practicing the entire year. You're practicing the entire year, so you should be on tip top game, and obviously it looks like you are. So, it seems like you are going to be fine. I don't think there's much I can offer you, other
Mm,
than just like correcting these small mistakes that could come up, and really just like letting you know about it. It's ultimately up to you to do
mm,
whatever it takes to fix it. But yeah, the only other thing I think you would probably want is like a system design thing. I don't know what your future goals are though. Since apparently you're just starting the job, so I
yeah.
assume it'll be at least another year and a half to 2 years before you want to switch anyway.
Yeah. That's very true. Okay. Yeah. I definitely. I think the system would be good, but it definitely take. I think it'd probably be a year and a half before I would want to. Yeah, before I would do that. Cool. So coding's good. System is next. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. If I still feel the same way in a year or so, I'll reach out to you and then we can go from there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Cool. Sounds good.
All right, take care, man.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.